Today we'll be talking about a rhombus, a rectangle, and a square. I don't have my drawing pad today, so I'm just going to do it off the notes that I've put in here. And it's pretty straightforward, so it's not really imperative that I actually write things down. So let's look at the rhombus first. A rhombus is a parallelogram with four congruent sides. So a rhombus looks like this, and it's just pushed over at the side. It's a parallelogram with four congruent sides. But it also, let's see if it could actually be something else in this. A rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. A square is a parallelogram with four congruent sides and four right angles. So all of these sound really similar, but let's look at it in a Venn diagram shape. So we talk about parallelograms, and that's the big box here. So we have all of these shapes that are parallelograms, and remember, parallelograms mean that the opposite sides are parallel to one another. So here's our rectangle, here's another. So you see all of these four-sided figures, and the opposite sides are parallel. So that makes them all parallelograms. But what separates them are the fact if they're rhombuses or rectangles. So we know that rhombuses have four congruent sides. So if we look at this, we know this one has four congruent sides, this one does, and also a square does. So a square could be considered a rhombus as well. A rectangle is a parallelogram with four right angles. So these rhombuses could not be a rectangle, correct? So then we go over to our rectangle area and we go, oh, I see. There's four right angles in all of these. But this square is also a rectangle because it has four right angles. But what makes it a square on its own is that it has congruent sides. So the only shape here that fits all of these categories is a square. It's a parallelogram that is also a rhombus and a rectangle. A rectangle just fits the rectangles and the parallelograms, and a rhombus just fits rhombuses and parallelograms. So that's a kind of a nice visual to see how that fits. Let's look at the rhombus corollary, and that states that a quadrilateral is a rhombus if and only if it has four congruent sides. So it has to have those four congruent sides in order to be a rhombus. So if we look, squares and these two shapes are rhombuses because they have four congruent sides. The rectangle corollary is a quadrilateral is a rectangle if and only if it has four right angles. So we look up here and we go, oh, rectangle, four right angles, and a square is also a rectangle. The square corollary states that a quadrilateral is a square if and only if it is a rhombus and a rectangle. So it has to be a rhombus, which means it has four congruent sides, and it has to be a rectangle because it has four right angles. Let's look down. Keep going. Let's look at the theorems. So we have theorem 6.11, a parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if its diagonals are perpendicular. So let's look at the diagonals going on the rhombus. So we're going across, these are the diagonals, and they create a right angle. So therefore it is a rhombus because AC is perpendicular to BD. Another theorem, 6.12, a parallelogram is a rhombus if and only if each diagonal bisects a pair of opposite angles. So we're looking here, we have our diagonals and they bisect, which means that they're going to create those opposite alternate exterior angles. So ABCD is a rhombus if and only if AC bisects DAB and BCD, and BD, right here, bisects ADC and CBA. And theorem 6.13 states a parallelogram is a rectangle if and only if its diagonals are congruent. So the diagonals are always going to be equal to one another. So ABCD is a rectangle if and only if AC is congruent to BD. So that's the information we have on a rhombus, a rectangle, and a square. All you need to get from that are the important points. It would be good to sketch this diagram to have that. And also these 3 points here, you don't need to write what's on the left here. The corollaries are important and your theorems are important. Okay, have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow.